Welcome to Leadership Trademarked, the podcast where we explore what it truly means to lead in today's uncertain world. Built on decades of experience across industries, we go beyond theory to examine the real tools, challenges, and outcomes that define leadership today. In Season 1, we laid the foundation, bringing together voices from across sectors to uncover the core principles of effective leadership. Now in Season 2, we turn our attention to the existential challenges organizations face: uncertainty, rapid technology changes, and shifting generational expectations. We kick off the season with founding members Leslie Riley and Rosalind Kingsmill, sharing over 80 years of senior leadership experience, and myself, Sylvia Fraser, a leader driving inclusion and innovation in municipal government and public service. Supporting us behind the scenes is Finley Gain, whose tech expertise ensures our conversations reach you smoothly and professionally. So join us as we unpack real-world leadership with insight, purpose, and actionable strategies, helping you define and refine your own leadership trademark.
Hello, and welcome to Leadership Trademarked. I'm here with my colleague and good friend, Roz Kingsmill, and our producer, Finn Gain, and our special guest, Shira Yoskovitch. Welcome, and thank you all for coming this evening.
So much.
We are going to talk about today, well, this is Season 2, and in Season 2, we've been pulling together some tools and frameworks to help leaders in a world that is uncertain with lots of priorities and lots of stuff coming at us. And so tonight, we're actually going to talk about a framework for setting priorities and executing strategy. Shira is, we're lucky to have her back for a second time. She was here earlier in Season 1 to talk about the future of work. And tonight she's here to talk about the framework that she uses for setting priorities and executing strategy. This is a really important topic. We hear over and over again from people how one of the difficult things they have is, where do I start? I don't know where I stand. I'm not really quite sure where we're headed. And in that kind of an environment, it's really hard to do your best work. And it's really hard for your team to do their best work. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Shira is an award-winning strategy and transformation leader with 30 years of comprehensive global expertise in cross-industry supply chain, operations, and technology. She is passionate about the customer and employee experience and ensuring that an organization's operations are in optimal service of the overall brand experience. Shira has also held executive leadership positions at companies such as SCI Group, Aptos Retail, and Aero Electronics. And she's also been an advisor to public and private sector organizations who are in the process of undergoing both digital and business transformations. So welcome, Shira. We're really happy to have you here this evening. And I think I'll just let you talk for a few minutes about your approach to this framework for setting priorities and executing strategy.
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back. I'm always excited to be able to talk with you guys and to really talk about how organizations bring this stuff to life. A lot of times you hear about strategy, you hear about transformation, you hear about, all these different objectives, and they all sound very fabulous and very snazzy and very, sexy and interesting. But at the end of the day, they're really only worth what can be executed, right? The real value of all of these things is they serve as the guidepost, the lighthouse, if you will, for what organizations need to do, want to do, are compelled to do, are paid to do, sort of pick your to do. And a lot of times when I'm talking to, I'll say organization because sometimes they're startups and scale ups, sometimes they're Fortune 50, sometimes they're government. But interestingly, they all tackle the same thing, which is I'm going to come in on Monday morning. My team is going to come in on Monday morning. And what is it that we're doing? that is of value, right? Value in service to the customers, the employees, the partners, depending on where you sit in the ecosystem. I will say I have developed a process that to me is somewhere between art and science. And you will ask 10 people and get 20 different versions of how they like to go about doing this. This is a model that I have used over time, and it considers, importantly to me, it considers not just the voices of who and what is important, but it also really is about and then what. So what? Who cares? How does it affect my day? At the end of the day, that's the thing that people need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it.
And Shira, people are telling me that they are afraid of setting their priorities. So I think your thoughts and your experience on this are going to be really important for people to hear, because quite frankly, nobody's talking about this stuff anymore. They're all talking about how to hang on to their job, not get in trouble, go along with the flow, and then run for the hills. And that's an exaggeration, but a whole lot of stuff is just not getting done.
Yeah, so let's tackle that, because it's I would say it's one that is very much at the forefront of everybody's minds at the moment. And I think, when I talk to colleagues that are CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, sort of pick your C-suite title, and I talk to folks that are newer into the market, you're right, it is a common theme. I think for me, there's a couple of things to unpack in that conversation. Number one, the priorities that you set, the actions that you take are not about your boss. The actions and the priorities that you take are about who are you in service of? You are in service of a customer. You are in service of, sometimes that's an internal customer, an external customer. Again, depending on what kind of organization it is we're talking about here. But at the end of the day, every single person, CEO, board, all the way through to the newest new hire intern, they are all in service of at least one person, and they are all service by at least one person, right? Everybody. The priorities are not about, are you pleasing an individual? They are about, are you satisfying the thing that you are in service of, right? So that's sort of, I would say, point number one, or group number one, if you will. I think group number two, when people talk about not setting priorities, in effect, they are consciously setting priorities. They're setting a priority to not do something as opposed to do something.
Yeah.
Right? By omission or commission, people are making decisions about what to do or what not to do. So it always goes back to, and I think I talked a lot about this actually when I talked about the future of work way back when, right? Which is, what is the why that is driving the behavior or the worry or whatever that emotion may be? At the end of the day, you got to crack the why. That then also plays as a mirror as to whether or not the organization has the right strategy to begin with.
And if I can add to that, nobody seems to have the focus or the agenda or the confidence or the curiosity, whatever you want to call it, about talking about what are the risks if we do this? What are the risks if we don't do this? And what are the rewards? I mean, those conversations aren't being had from the people that I'm in touch with.
Yeah, they're brutally hard conversations. And I would say they're brutally hard conversations when the market is happy, when the world is happy.
You're right. Yeah.
When we are not, dealing with PTSD of whatever 4-year, whatever it was, pandemic, followed by then a series of micro elections in various economies, followed by multiple wars, all leading to the scenario in which we find ourselves today. By the way, I know I sound like a ray of sunshine, but but on a good day, those are tough conversations because they require a level of intellectual and maturity honesty that is really tough especially when it's not just about you, when it's about you in the face of a group of people. But I think the thing that I always try and coach on, and a lot of my work is spent like this, which is setting a strategy, setting a priority. You don't have to set 50 priorities, by the way,
Right.
because 50 things are priorities, nothing is priorities, right? Setting a priority. That is about clearing out the noise level. That is about how people are going to get through this kind of a tough
Mhm.
period, through a market cycle, so that they can get to a place that is more comfortable, right? When people talk about, I say people, when organizations talk about priorities or strategies, these are not meant to be encyclopedic and they are not meant to be anything and everything to satisfy everybody. They are meant to be, what do I do come Monday morning?
Mhm.
Where am I putting my money? Where am I putting my resources? If I have limited people, if I have limited funds, limited capacity, which
Mhm.
every organization, every business organism has the same set of conversations, by the way. Nobody's
Yes.
original.
Yes.
What do they place where? It is the same conversation, and it's always interesting to me when I relate it to folks this way. It's the same conversation, whether you realize it or not, that you're having with yourself at your kitchen table as you're deciding, am I going to go on this trip or am I not going to go on this trip? Am I going to buy this thing or I'm not going to buy this thing? Now, some people are going to be way more risk averse and some people are going to be way more risk tolerant, right? But at the end of the day, it's the same internalized conversation that you're having. This is about is by defining it, by setting a term to it, it's making it actionable. It's bringing it to a conscious activity. A
Mhm.
conscious activity can then be talked about, messaged, coached, trained, actioned, enabled technologically, measured, and then ultimately you can get to your reward conversation.
And I'm with you all the way. And how do I want to say this? So when I work with a team or I coach a person on the role they have, the same things come up, and those things create all this uncertainty and conflict. And the easiest way to get rid of conflict is stop doing it and start setting your goals, big ones, small ones, will we, won't we, risk, reward. Like chunk it down, chunk it up. You don't have to agree with it, but at least it's expressed as a real thing as opposed to left out of the conversation. And it seems to me that from what I'm reading and watching and studying and conversations, that people have lost the, I'm just going to call it courage to speak their mind without it being a, well, it's all your fault. And if you hadn't had this last year, we wouldn't be where we are. And that's a dumb idea kind of talk, which doesn't go anywhere. When you start using the approach you're suggesting, Shira, which I'm all on board with, it's much easier to do that with one person than a team. But regardless, it's still difficult. How do you get through that? Stop blaming everybody thing.
Look, I don't think that anybody, in my experience, I don't think that anybody can ever fully remove emotion. And I do think that emotion is healthy in some scenarios, right? They are healthy in terms of understanding what is valued versus what is not. I think the value statement of what actually is value in different organizations is different. I always say to people, if someone's not willing to pay for it, they don't value it enough. Not every organization is about the financial transaction, so that doesn't always translate, but the premise is the same. If it was your money, would you make the same business decision? If you had to roll up to RBC and get the money out of your own account or pick your bank of choice, would you make the same decision that you're making? That's value question number one. Value question number two is, at the end of the day, are you or is someone willing to actually pay for it? If you're not, you don't want it badly enough. And if you don't want it badly enough, stop doing it. right? So to me, the core of that, of getting through that fear quotient, if you will, is be very clear on what is the value proposition that you're trying to promote. The strategy serves the value proposition. The priorities serve the strategy, which serves the value proposition.
Right.
You got to be able to draw a straight line between those. And if you extrapolate that all the way down through an organization or all the way across an organization, the value prop for the CEO and the value prop for the person who is, let's say in my experience working in a 3PL, they're the ones picking parts off the shelf in a warehouse. They have to be able to articulate the same value prop at the end of the day. What is that company in service of? What do you make money from? What is your place in the ecosystem?
That answers my question on character. Finn, you want to say something?
I love that we are dangling this framework in front of the listeners. And I would love to hear you break down what it looks like in practice. But before you do that, I was hoping that you could share some signs and symptoms that you notice of badly done prioritization sessions or strategy sessions.
Well, we're going to need a longer podcast. For me, a couple of telltale signs, and, I would say they're probably not terribly original, but some telltale signs that something went off the rails is when someone tells me that they have 20 priorities. When I look at different companies do performance reviews in different ways, right? And when I look at someone's performance plan and the weighting of everything is like 5%. I mean, do me a favor. It takes more than 5% effort to write it on the page, right? That to me says something went off the rail about what is actually important. Because priorities are set at individual, at team, at group, at company, at organization level. They are multifaceted. So, that to me is always an interesting thing. And whenever I start working with organizations, I actually ask to see what the performance measurement culture is. Or when they tell me that something can't be measured. Can't be measured. That's interesting, right? Everything can be measured. You just need to know what question you're asking to be measured. So when something can't be measured, if it can't be measured, then why is it a priority? You don't care about it enough, right?
Yeah, or you probably don't.
It's not valued enough. If you cannot attach a value to something, it doesn't have value. And then, the other exercise that I always take teams through, and it never fails. I will say I've been at this a long time. And I have done this same sort of exercise literally with organizations around the world. And I swear to God, I can pinpoint it every single time when it's about to happen, which is when what I like to do is I like to get the group together that is working on priorities. Sometimes that's the exec team, sometimes that's a more cross-functional, multi-layer team, whatever it is, whatever that core group is. And I say, all right, start on one side of the table, start talking about your priorities and where you are and do you have resources and things like that. Inevitably, I do this exercise with 5 people, with 10 people, with 30 people. I swear to God, it doesn't matter. By the time I'm halfway through the group, that person's priorities have now effectively undone the priorities of the person at the start of the team.
Oh, God.
Right? And the root of that is, number one, there's not actually an overarching KPI or measurement or framework. And so everything is being done stochastically. It's being done in silos. But number two, they're working off of different definitions on what is value, right? Part of the prioritization conversation is also who owns what. When I say who owns the customer and everybody raises their hands, impossible. Not everybody owns the customer in an organization.
Right.
Not everybody, let's say it's a physical goods company, not everybody owns inventory. Not everybody owns profitability. People contribute to it, yes. People rely on it. So back to the customer and supplier relationship, right? But at the end of the day, if everybody owns everything, nobody owns anything. It's that urgent versus important thing. If
Okay,
everything
yeah,
is
yeah.
urgent, nothing is urgent.
So when you've got that out, maybe not everybody gets it, but you get it,
Yeah.
and some of them get it, and some of them don't get it. Then what do you do then?
So always tie it back. For me, this is a three-step thing. I always find it important to get the teams talking about, and I'm going to say really important to any of these conversations is the distinction between agreement and alignment. And Roz, you alluded to it a little bit earlier in one of your questions. Organizations do not have to agree.
Right.
It's great if they do, but it's actually not an essential. Alignment says we're going to debate it all in the room till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, when you walk out onto the floor, into the warehouse, into an investor presentation, to a customer, pick your audience, there is a single aligned voice, right? So as a leadership team member, we would debate things really till we were blue in the face. But at the end of the day, you leave the meeting, there's a decision, or you make a decision, then you leave the meeting, right? And then everybody's going back to their teams, and it's one voice, one answer. Doesn't matter what got said in the room, right? That is alignment. Because priority execution requires alignment, it does not require agreement.
Could we just go back for a minute? A little while ago, you were starting to talk about the sort of the key elements of this framework that you use. And at the risk of getting too far deep into the weeds here, could you just kind of take us through how it works and how you use it with your teams to establish some cohesion in the priorities and executing the strategy?
Sure. So, for me, I break things into let's understand it, then let's execute it, right? You can't execute it if you don't understand it. And to me, when I talk about understanding something, it's I'm going to say three-pronged, if you will. Number one, what is it? Capital I, capital T, right? What is it that we're trying to do? What is the ultimate strategy, the ultimate value of that the organization, again, public or private, big or small, doesn't matter, that they are trying to do, right? Typically, this is a conversation that has a time horizon. Now, I say typically because right now, given the marketplace, organizations are working in 12, 18, and 24 months as quote unquote strategic plans, if not even shorter. Typically, this would be a 3 to 5 year cycle, depending on the industry that you're living in, right? But
Right.
really what this is it's a horizon. And the horizon is reflective of where the market is going. Is it mature? Is it a mature product, a mature service, or is it innovation, right? Innovation is going to have shorter cycles, maturity is going to have longer cycles, things like that. But what is it that the organization is trying to achieve at a top level? And I will say my same, you don't need 20 metrics at any level. That's very true for you don't need 20 metrics to tell you if your strategy is right. You
Right.
really don't. At the end of the day, so what? Who cares? How does it affect my day? Find metrics that wrap around those three conversations. And I, by the way, will give a shout out to my very first boss at Arrow Electronics who taught me that every time I walked into her office. She would say, you have to answer those three questions. And if you can't, she would very politely spin me out of her office and send me back to my desk. Totally was. Absolutely. Jan Salzgiver, maybe my favorite boss of all time. But her, and when I talk, and by the way, I was like 24 when this was going on. So, teach them while they're young, teach them early, right? The same
Right.
conversation. So
Right.
what? Who cares? How does it affect my day? Those are the three things that organizations are caring about because those are the pillars of a value proposition, right? Those are the things that a company is commercializing. Not what they're thinking about, it's what they're making money from and what they plan to make money from. And so, what is it that the organization is trying to do on a longer term horizon. And where are you in that horizon? Are you 1 year on a 5-year plan? Are you 3 years on a 3-year plan? That's going to tell you what is my runway, if you will, that you have to get to be successful or to course correct. And then, everything that the company determines to have value or priority needs to have a number attached to it. Sometimes the number is a trend, right? Sometimes it's the trend of the numbers that means more than the actual micro number. And sometimes, cash in the bank is cash in the bank. You're not looking for a trend on cash in the bank. You're looking for how much money you have, right? So it has to, you have to understand that sometimes these will be movement-based numbers and sometimes they will be moment-in-time numbers, but everything can have a number wrapped around it. Once you have that, then the next thing I like to do is what is the market in which the organization is interacting, right? Where is the market in its own evolution, in its own cycle, in its own risk stage? Right now, risky time for a lot of companies. Not, if you're in cybersecurity, that's one kind of risk. And if you are in financial market, that's a different kind of risk. And if you are, looking to make cell phones in overseas markets, that is yet a third kind of risk. So I'm trying to go here in 5 years, but this is, all the noise factors, opportunities, threats, etc. that exist. Who else am I competing with? Who's new? Who's up and coming? Who's hungry and maybe looking to check some companies into the boards? Who is, on a tier 1 basis and feeling really confident and not seeing, that the light that's about to hit him is a train? All of those things. What are these things that are around me? And it's important to have that context, because if something is about to hit you or has hit you, that should by its nature create more urgency on a priority list than something that is nice to have, may or may not actually happen. And, it's sort of ancillary to what we want to do anyways. So I'm going to keep an eye on it, but I don't necessarily have to worry about it. It is not Monday morning's problem, right? And so those are the lenses that we're using that. And then the last part of that, so first I looked at the strategy. What's my overall road direction? How far down the highway am I? The next one is, what's around the highway that I have to keep an eye on? And the third one is, where is my organization today? How are they doing? Are they tired? Are they not? Are they feeling scrappy? Are they not? Do you have budget, right? Do you have budget? It is a very binary state. I have budget or I don't have budget. Not to say that you can't action something if you don't have immediate budget, but that requires choice. That requires active decision making, critical thinking, problem solving, right? That's why those criteria to me are important in the team. They are not esoteric conversations for me. And then, people talk about change and transformation, and listen, I talk about change and transformation, and it always sounds so fabulous, so exciting until you're the one in the middle of it.
Yes,
I don't need to change. I'm fabulous. So and so in the next office needs to change. But at the end of the day, whatever decision you're going to make around prioritization and investment, people, process, tech, whatever, towards that prioritization will create a ripple of change. Sometimes the change is small, sometimes the change is big. How much change is your team able to handle? What is their fatigue level? I saw a lot of organizations during COVID try and kick off massive transformation programs, and they never got off. They started a truckload of things, executed nothing. Why?
Right.
Because the team is so bloody tired. There's only so many things that you can do at any point in time while you're keeping the lights on, trying to change, what people do every day. That's a lot.
And Shira, to that point, in that sort of confusion, people suffer from cognitive overload, and then they can't figure it out in their head easily. they get swamped with the emotion of I can't remember, or oh God, how do I do this, or what was his name, or what did I say? Of course, they don't tell anybody this, but you get half-baked pieces of work.
You get disengagement.
Yeah, well, that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Sure.
You get disengagement that manifests itself in different ways.
Right.
Right. And that's, when I think about the role of leaders, and leaders exist at all levels, and not every leader has a title. When I think about the role of leaders, they're paying attention to, I would say, the hard metrics, the hard indicators, but their job is to look at what are the behaviors that are emerging,
Right.
what are
Right.
the engagement factors, do people feel quote unquote connected to the strategy, to the market, to the mission, all
Right.
of those things. At
Right.
the end of the day, people are emotional beings.
Right. Well, except the ones that aren't, but oh well.
Well, there are other words for those, right?
Oh yeah. Okay.
But at the end of the day, what drives the ability, why is it so important to execute? Okay, it's important to execute because you need to actually get to a result, sure. The more important factor about execution is because it breeds buy-in.
Yeah.
The reason most projects fail, the reason most transformations fail is because starting everything is not a trick. Executing it, finishing it, putting it to bed and into the rear view mirror and garnering the benefit, emotional and financial and productivity, right? The benefit, that is what breeds confidence, engagement, continuity, change readiness, willingness, talent growth. That is the thing that breeds.
And to your point, on the season 1, we had a young man who was running the staffing in a high-end restaurant. And when asked about the performance of these people, he said, well, I talked to them and let them know where they were missing the boat or doing it wrong. And he said repeatedly that people would say, well, why aren't you yelling at me? Why aren't you punishing me? And he said, well, I'm trying to understand what I did wrong so that you didn't know what you were supposed to do right. And it's a brilliant attitude, and instead of blaming them, he's saying, you did this wrong. What he wanted to know himself as the leader was what he had done wrong so that they didn't get the direction properly. Well, you can imagine how fast he got these people engaged because they weren't afraid to say what they didn't know.
Right. Before we wrap up this evening, I have one more question. And I've heard you say this, and I'm not sure if I have the quotation correct, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard you say prioritization is a process of consciousness or conscientiousness. I'm not sure which. What do you mean when you say that?
It's both, actually.
It's both? Okay.
Right? So yes, you're right. Hold on. No, it's a process of both. And because what you're doing is you're creating a conscious attachment to something that needs to get done. Right? It's like the power of writing it down. The power of writing it down or typing it or whatever it is, the physical connection. When you consider that most adults learn in a tactile manner, right? So it is a reinforcement of I care about this. It is bringing something to a conscious level as opposed to a we'll wing it and see what happens kind of level. Right? And so the moment you make something conscious, you establish a value equation with it.
Right.
By establishing the value equation, you're going to consciously decide I'm investing or I'm not investing. Both of which, and not investing in a priority is not always the wrong thing, because sometimes the investment has to happen somewhere else so that by the time it hits the other thing you've identified as a priority but didn't invest in, maybe the impact is a little bit less. Right?
And Shira, that takes living through it. That takes experience. You don't learn this stuff at university or in your first job. This takes, meeting the challenges and sometimes going into the abyss because the learning was not conscious. It was not unconscious. Anyway, they didn't really get it until the result happens. And that's called having an experience.
Yeah. So I think so. There's a lot of it certainly that is experience. I mean, look, I have been the architect of more than my fair share of mistakes and failures in a work setting. And, and it's funny because I remember as you were telling the story of this gentleman at the restaurant, I was recalling I had made a really big mistake. I was a product manager many years ago, and I made just really a huge mistake. And I walked into my boss's office, and my head was hanging, and I remember I was shaking. I was sure I was going to get fired.
Yeah.
I was sure that I was going to get fired. And I remember standing in front of him and shaking. And I told him what had happened. And, he talked me through, okay, well, call this person, right? Like, this is how we sort of stopgap what just happened. And at the end of it, I was like, so that's it? He said, yeah. I said, that's it. He said, listen, I'm going to ask you something. Is anyone ever going to be harder on you right now than you are on yourself?
Oh, brilliant.
I said, no, probably not. He said, well, then we're done. Learn the lesson. And this is the other thing that I say all the time, and learn the lesson and move on. Right? And that's a huge thing. Learn the lesson. You made it, you prioritized something, you did it, it worked, learn that lesson. It didn't work, more importantly, learn that lesson. Why? Who, what, ask all the questions, learn it, and move forward.
Right.
That, to me, I will say, for me, singularly, was the most important lesson that I ever learned at work.
Shira, if you were to give advice to a new leader about what they could start to do tomorrow to help them start setting relevant and important priorities, what are the one or two things they could start tomorrow?
I would say to keep it really simple. Pick 3 customers, pick up the phone to the customer and say, what is it that's going to make the biggest difference for you?
Okay.
And then turn around and ask every member on the team that works for that leader, directly and indirectly, if you can. I mean, if you have 100 people, that's going to hurt, but and ask them the exact same question.
Okay.
You will find themes across both the customers and the employees. I guarantee it.
Okay.
And then pick one.
Yeah, one.
Right.
But you don't have to pick 50. You pick one. And then you say to the team, depending on what it is, of course, in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months, I'm going to tell you how it's going.
Okay. All right.
And then you pick the next one on the list, and then you keep going.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you for your time this evening. It was really a very interesting discussion. I loved having you here. I only wish we've known each other for, 20 years?
Something like that, yeah.
I wish I had met you much sooner.
Shira, we've been discussing the importance of priority setting, but what about when priorities shift? Is it okay to revisit them?
It's okay to revisit your priorities. Priorities are not cast in stone indefinitely. As the market changes, as things arise, it's actually a really powerful exercise on a regular basis, call it every 6 months maybe, to go back and say, am I still caring about the same thing in the same order? Right? And so I think that because organizations need to be nimble, not chaotic, nimble. They need to be reflective of the marketplace in which they are operating. And so it is perfectly acceptable, if not at times actually advised, to crack open your priorities list and make sure that everybody is still standing by that same prioritization, excuse me.
Thanks so much to Shira for joining us on the Leadership Trademarked podcast. So much leadership and strategic wisdom shared in under 40 minutes. We covered the fundamentals of what priorities are, how to set them, how to measure them, how to iterate on them over time, and how to strike alignment on them, even if your teams aren't in agreement. I would suggest all leaders to take inspiration from the actionable steps Shira describes, even if it's just a single conversation tomorrow, where you ask, how we help you do more? What support, ideas, or resources do you need? Just a single question can get the ball rolling. Until next time.